What's the scuttlebutt?
So, what is scuttlebutt? Anybody hear anything?
Scuttlebutt! The definition of that word is a rumor or gossip.
One of the things that I was going to ask to get started with you was how's your rhythm, but that might be a little bit overplayed, just given that that's come up in a couple of your interviews. I'll maybe start by asking if you're aware of the fact you have a 4.3 out of 5 stars on Rate My Professor from your time at the Naval Academy.
I'm embarrassed by that. It's hilarious. And in fact, there's one comment on it that says something like, "This is the worst instructor I've ever had. He just tells stories." But there's other glowing reviews as well. So I really enjoyed that time. That's a funny first question. And I suppose things live forever on the internet.
4.3 out of 5 is pretty good. Like, I don't think that that's going to push anybody away from taking that class.
Yeah, I have a few hot tamales.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah, I find it funny when people they say you shouldn't take this class, but it's really easy. And it's funny that often that doesn't correlate to necessarily what makes a good or a bad class.
One thing that I really was proud of in that experience is I intensely edited every paper to the point of insanity. So I had a lot of writing assignments and would hand edit and track change the paper for the student. So try to teach them how to write a more compelling essay. And it took me forever. Most teachers just assign a grade to a paper. And I went kind of nuts on the editing of these student papers to try to teach them sort of the lesson about professional communication. So at least I did that for them.
You definitely did. Did you find that was successful to them? Was that valuable to maybe even a few people?
It's hard to know what sticks with people. It's funny because, all of us have these experiences where somebody says an offhand remark and then it sticks with you for the next 20 years. And that person who said that remark would never remember that episode. So my hope is that there's a few people out there who are inspired to get creative and to put their thoughts in writing, which of course is the only thing that helps you order your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's the classic line. You don't write to express what you think, you write to discover what you think.
I've found that to be absolutely true. And I think that more people need to have that same realization, because I don't think that even knowing that statement to be true, it really doesn't hit you until you actually see it play out, I think, in your own life.
It's so true. I have a feeling most people have never really tried to write. They do it for school. And then once school ends, they don't keep writing, which is a very odd thing. So it's I have a second theory, which is related. Most people have never been in great physical condition, great shape. If you're in excellent physical condition, then running actually feels effortless. And most people have never felt that in their lives. And it's sort of the same metaphor for writing. It's super hard. I read one of your Substack posts and you're like, wow, I've just realized how hard this is to do every week, to write a newsletter and publish it every week. It's kind of I would say it's almost equivalent to a physical fitness or a condition. The writing clearly, quickly, and well is a skill, in the same way being in shape is a condition, a state that you're in.
I think that there's also some interesting parallels too that come about after so much repetition. It becomes something that you almost can't live without. I know that you were a runner when you're at the Naval Academy, so I know that this will resonate with you. But there comes a point in your fitness. I certainly am not there with writing yet, but I'm getting there and working to see that. But there comes a point when you start to eliminate things that get in the way of your workout. Or if I have this one drink at dinner, I'm not going to run as fast. I'm going to be 20-second pace slower the next day, or whatever, that even just a slight tinge of something not being right. And then take that to writing. It's oh, well, this will my process is so important. Like I need to adhere to this. And you naturally self-select into the best way to optimize for that one behavior.
Yeah, I think the word for that is systematic. So a lot of people, LeBron's like, I have the process that he follows, or TB12, the program. But it really is like my coach used to quote the Villanova coach. I think his name is Jumbo Elliott, and he said, "There's 4 words for every great runner: live like a clock." And it's like structure your entire lifestyle for the activity of training. And to be clear, that is not what my life is like right now, sadly. I don't have like the world's greatest rhythm. I'm not in shape. So I'm not trying to be one of these like, hustlers or strivers or, these Twitter personalities who, claim perfection or anything like that. But I do think if you do like a certain set of things to eliminate from your life, then like success becomes automatic, or getting in shape becomes a byproduct, like the product of that greater abstraction. So like, if I drink less alcohol, go to bed early, and wake up to an alarm like instantly, and like get out of bed instantly, those 3 things, if I just did those 3, getting in shape would be automatic.
I completely agree. And it's interesting because I am a recovering, or in the process of recovery, on dealing with, how do I want to put this? I'm trying to get over being a person that constantly looks for the way things ought to be done, because what the beauty of the process is actually finding it out for yourself. And to do that, you need to start with a really wide scope. And then, like you said, systematize. You naturally kind of want to do it when you really like something, or when you really are loving a process, you automatically go that direction. I know in some of my younger, more reckless years, I would constantly claim and brag about my caffeine intake, and to talk about how caffeine didn't affect me when I slept. And then I went for a period of time without taking any caffeine and watched my sleep increase dramatically almost overnight. And I was like, I wonder what this is. And in hindsight, it's, hey, stupid, like you are impacted by these things in ways that you don't anticipate. That's just one example, but there's a lot of things that fall into that category of lifestyle changes that over a long enough period of time make a big difference in your life.
I agree. And these wearable devices, the Whoops, the Oura Rings, the Fitbits, the Apple Watches, they actually provide data that is quite jarring. If you watch how many steps you're taking, it just to be aware of that changes your approach to your daily life. And prior to these devices, I guess if you carry around your phone, it automatically tracks your steps. But 10, 15 years ago, we just had no idea on like the real raw data. Having said that, though, I think there's something like mystical about performing at a high level, that you do it best if you're logging less data in your own mind, like weighing yourself down mentally with it. So for example, if you're like a runner and you do a training log, I did that in high school for 1 or 2 seasons and had terrible seasons because I was like sort of overthinking it. Like the best attitude is to be a hippie about it and just go run as a free spirit and train according to a program that a coach will give you. But then, like do it for joy, like the primitive pursuit of, running fast in competition. It's like better than, I think, logging every calorie that you eat or something like that. My coach always would say, assassinate your desserts. We literally had to put ketchup on top of any dessert that was on a table at the Naval Academy, which was sad because it was wasted food, but we were required to do it by our coach. It's called assassinating your dessert. So you're not like tracking calories, but you're as part of the culture of the program. I thought that might be funny to share.
That's an interesting kind of like heuristic, and I bet probably like a funny thing. You sit down at the table with your running buddies, and it becomes somebody grabs the ketchup first thing, and we're gonna get this out of the way and ruin it so it doesn't sit there and look at us. I have found that so true. This last summer, I was going to do an attempt at a half Ironman and spoke with several like ultra runners, and they were asking me all these questions about, how much time are you spending in Z2, and like, how many miles are you logging on this? And I'm like, man, I'm just trying to like run a marathon. Like I'm not, I can't think about trying to track all of these things. Like I just am trying to finish, and I'm not worried about time or anything like that. So I think that you need to be aware of the improvements, and sometimes you need to see the data, but you can easily get caught up in what that might look like and kind of too focused on it.
Yeah, I agree. It sucks the joy out of it sometimes. Did you finish the half Ironman?
No, embarrassingly, like I think physically I would have been able to do it, but I drastically underprepared monetarily. I started buying things for it way too late. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I bought a wetsuit. And then I'm like, I still didn't have the shoes that I needed. And then I also didn't have my race entry. And, all of a sudden it was like the last 2 weeks before the race, and I have like $3,000 worth of things I need to buy. And I was like, no, but it's on, I'm going to try for a full this year. I've got a much better head start on it and have almost all of the equipment. So I'm going to try and do like a big, raise a bunch of money for charity, and try and do that this year. So we'll see.
That's really neat. That's an unexpected answer, by the way. I never would have considered the financial aspect of it.
It's tremendously expensive. Probably one of the most expensive sports that I think that I've seen.
Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, getting in condition in 3 different sports is insanity, and swimming and running are among the very best activities to get in shape. Very hard. I swam in high school. I know how hard it is to get in swimming shape. It's just a time-consuming enterprise.
That was one of the things that I noticed too, is like you want to go do like a trial and do like all 3 evolutions in one day. It's like, that's the whole day. You wake up, do your morning routine, and it's like, you spend an hour in the ocean or like in an open water or in the pool. And then, you go bike for 3-4 hours, and then, run for an hour or two. Like and then you're also cooked at the end of that. Like you're not walking after that. You're going to go sit on the couch.
Well, good luck with it. I think it's very, very cool. I ran a marathon once and vowed at the finish line never to do it again. So I'm gonna honor that commitment.
I appreciate you being able to stick with your word on that. After watching you like the last couple of years, like from the sidelines, it seems like you have a very systematized way of thinking. We were just talking about like how your body is like systematizing different and optimizing for a certain process. And I would guess that you have spent a fair amount of time thinking about that. Was that something that you have always done, or something that was developed over time?
I've read quite a few books on the creative process, and you never know what you're really interested in, except in retrospect. I call it spiraling into what you enjoy, spiraling into a passion, if you will. And looking back on it now, I realized I've always really enjoyed writing, the process of trying to express yourself on the page, and that extends all the way back to early high school. I've always enjoyed it, and it's a very odd thing because writing to me is painful, truly, like physically painful sometimes, and very taxing. But nevertheless, even though I understand that it's painful, I still enjoy it, and I don't know exactly why. But like, I think a lot, like if my family would describe me, potentially, they've seen me behind a keyboard for a long time, all the time. In high school, I'd be like in the office, Windows 1, whatever the version was back in the day, just typing away, happily typing away. So that's like the core of it, is this like inherent curiosity and like trying to make an argument. But the process of it, I've never like been a guy that has like prolific output, unfortunately, because I've never like mastered getting in the creative rhythm in a system year in and year out. I wish I could be better at this, but I definitely have discovered the very best way to fill yourself with ideas and then to start writing with them. And this way, I think, is like boneheadedly obvious to everyone, but maybe they don't put it in these words. The most important thing is to choose very high quality sources, like the classics in the field, and to read those again and again and again. Then the key point is to take notes from clippings, so excerpting them into a file of any kind. This could be in your own writing physically, handwritten, or digitally. And I founded a company around this process, which ultimately failed. We can get into that in a second. But once you have excerpted something from a very high quality source, then you need to assign it a theme and then rewrite it in your own words, which proves that you understand what you just excerpted. And if you do that, it's very simple. Then you're literally creating from what you're consuming. So making the process of consumption an actual affirmative creative act is the whole point of like reading quality things. So shifting it from a passive to an active exercise is bottom line. Like Marcus Aurelius could have told you this thousands of years ago, but that's the system. It's very obvious. But and I've got a Notion file that I use, and I probably excerpt 2 to 4 things in it on a given day, and that just populates over time. So it's got many fields of things that have resonated with me, and that's another way to discover what you're interested in, is to just do that daily for several years and then read the file, and you're naturally going to pick things that have a resonance with you. So whatever is in that file is what you're passionate about. So you don't have to go choose your passion. Like, your passion chooses you.
You've talked elsewhere about that idea of active consumption, and we are natural consumers and become more consumerish every day by just TikTok, and especially it's just like this weird, our attention span just is getting lower and lower and lower over time, but you need an outlet in some way. And I've never heard somebody pitch trying to find your passion in that way, but I bet that that's extraordinarily effective. You also had mentioned in another conversation, I think you were a submariner, I believe, and you talked about, I think you were making a physics joke, but you were talking about the density, like a density function, and having a bunch of ideas in like really close proximity and like bouncing against each other, and how that is like a great way to form new and creative ideas. Yeah.
So the key point there is that every creative process to be successful has to reach a point where it is self-sustaining. And in the nuclear context, we learn about a thing called K effective, the multiple of when you have a nuclear fission reaction occurring with, say, uranium, some isotope of uranium. If you have enough uranium close enough together at the right temperature and with the right conditions, the sort of PV equals nRT sort of thing, you can start the reaction only when one fission creates more than one additional fission, one or more. So the reactor is so-called critical when the K effective is 1, meaning one fission creates one or more fissions, additional fissions. So the reactor is self-sustaining. And so your creative process will only be self-sustaining if you have a high enough density of ideas that are colliding with one another. And so the idea is to collide ideas against each other. And so, like, all creativity is a process of recombination. Creativity does not come from within your head. It occurs outside of your head. Creativity comes from without. There's a great quote on that. But I have this theory that when you see ideas on a page, those are the actual ideas, not the idea in your head. And this is a very fundamental thing. In other words, you cannot actually have an idea unless you can see it outside of your head, because we think in symbols. We're taught language when we're young, and language is words, and those words are symbols. And those symbols themselves are the ideas, not some metaphysical thing that doesn't exist inside your head. It's like the sentence is composed of symbols. If I'm being a little bit pedantic, I don't, stop me, but that is like the most important part of creating a self-sustaining process, is to have enough ideas in front of you. This is why ChatGPT is a massive game changer for everyone in the world. I am going to write a thread maybe tomorrow about how AI is massively still underhyped, not overhyped. Everyone says AI is very hyped. It's in a hype cycle right now. I think because language is the most useful technology ever developed, now that machines can use language and understand it and then communicate them back to us, we already will have the ideas outside of our head structured to then combine with and play with outside of our heads. ChatGPT is incredibly useful, incredibly useful. Even if it's not like, it puts ideas in front of you that you don't have to ever, it rescues you from the blank page forever. No one will ever struggle with a blank page. If you're 10 years old, in the next 5 years, it's going to get so good that it will pre-populate something that you can then massively refine and edit and make your own.
Hey, ChatGPT, I've had quite a bit of time messing with it, and it is an unbelievable tool. And I think that it's going to aid much more than just writers for several of the reasons that you just discussed. It's remixing, it's new angles, it's all of these things. I heard an interesting take, since you brought up ChatGPT, I heard an interesting take about how humans are interacting with it, in that we are wanting ChatGPT and several of these other like image generation and like all of the things in that field. We're wanting those systems to create new and original ideas, but we're wanting to like systematize ourselves. Like we're wanting the robots to get creative, and like it's not robots, it's that area, it's AI, it's all of that. We're wanting new combinations built from that, but simultaneously we're trying to like decrease our own creativity, which I think is a really interesting take, by like trying to outsource that. And I think that that's not right. I think that your point of view is actually the more effective use case of something like this. It's having our own things fed back to us in a new way.
Yeah. The way I think of it is all computing advances fundamentally are about creating new interfaces between the machine and the human. And so if you look at every Apple product that has been a breakthrough, it's always a breakthrough in one particular aspect of the interface between the human and the machine. So the click wheel for the original iPad, the resistive touch on the touch screen, the iPhone screen without the buttons, all of those are interface advancements, and the ChatGPT advancement was an interface advancement as well. It wasn't, so it's not about the fundamental technology behind it, which are the large language models. Those have been around. The breakthrough was allowing somebody to creatively interact with these language models, and they can summon all of the collective human knowledge and history within a very simple and intuitive interface. So when writing was invented in Sumeria, like that is when civilization took off. It was like jet fuel for civilization. And this is going to be like, you know, even much more powerful, because you not only are just sharing ideas between one human to another, it's like you're interacting with these language models which have trillions of parameters, or will have trillions of parameters. So I really don't think it can be overstated. The consequences of this technology are astounding in my view.
I certainly agree. And I was thinking about thinking about your history in preparation for this interview, and thinking about your time as a speechwriter for several very notable historical figures. And I'm wondering, do you think that the speechwriter position goes away for the military? Do they get that outsourced to ChatGPT?
That's funny. That's a very good question, an unexpected one. I think knowledge workers, people in creative fields, designers, both visual and writers, I think those fields are simply going to translate, or are simply going to be transformed by the most creative people most effectively using these AI tools. So anytime a technology advances like this, I have never had a concern that jobs would be lost. it's better to say that more jobs will be created, but the jobs will be much different and a higher order. So it's going to emancipate our minds and free us to solve harder problems and create even more beautiful things through these tools. It's just that the people who are going to be the most successfully creating with them are going to have to master these new set of tools. It also, like Paul Graham, who's a famous Twitter personality and the founder of YC and just a incredibly prolific writer himself, a deep thinker and well ahead of the curve on many technologies. He actually tweeted something that I massively disagree with, and that is he will never outsource his thinking to any of these tools. In other words, he prefers writing in Word or writing in Google Docs or whatever. But he doesn't think that for the machine to put words in his mouth, and he thinks it'll be inherently less interesting and surprising and creative, the output. I think he's going to change his mind on that. I think he's going to use these tools and take ownership of the end product, obviously every single word of the end product. But I think these tools are inherently useful for even a guy like him, even though he can write well without them. So to answer your actual question, I think the necessity for leaders to communicate throughout the breadth and depth of an organization and then externally from that organization, both to sort of the masses and then to the elites, all of those things, that necessity to persuade an audience is evergreen. It will never go away. And making words sing is, I think, an inherently human capacity, because you have to think about what will reach an audience and emotionally and intellectually at the same time, what will hit their head and their heart at the same time. So I think the speechwriters of the future are going to have these great, powerful ways to assist them in helping leaders think, because that's all you're really trying to do in that job. The point of speechwriting is not to write for someone, it's to write with them and to help them reach these other human beings. And so maybe much too long of an answer to all of your questions, but those are my thoughts.
Earlier, you were talking about rereading the greats and solidifying on a few handful of just key core ideas and just kind of resonating on those and marinating on them. What were some of your big takeaway ideas that you took from spending time with these General Mattis, SecDef Panetta? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yep.
What were your takeaways from them, those little excerpts that you pulled from your time with them?
First of all, I learned a lot more than just speechwriting with those from those experiences. And
yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. So
okay, because what you're doing, I learned about writing and about speechwriting clearly because that was part and parcel to the role. But what you're really seeing is leadership, and specifically leadership at the strategic level and of large enterprises, large organizations, so Pentagon, U.S. Central Command, et cetera. And I started at U.S. Central Command when there were 230,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen in the area of responsibility called U.S. Central Command. And that spans from, Israel on the west to Afghanistan on the east, and from Tajikistan in the north down to Oman in the south. So the Middle East broadly. And it's a challenge to lead an organization, which has that breadth of different activities ongoing. And so behind the scenes, what you're seeing is how they are sort of getting the big ideas expressed both to their leadership, so to the president and to the Secretary of Defense, and down to the soldiers on the ground, somebody who's wearing boots in Baghdad. And one of the coolest things that David Petraeus pioneered was writing what he called the SecDef Weekly Report. And he held himself accountable to writing to the SecDef every Saturday morning. And so that was the principal responsibility of actually the speechwriting team and what he called the Commander's Initiatives Group, or his brain trust. So there's maybe 8 to 10 of us in this sort of office adjacent to his. And throughout the week, he would be emailing us ideas of what to put into the SecDef Weekly, which is what am I doing in my area of responsibility, Mr. Secretary? And that was extremely difficult to write, but unbelievably important, because by the end of every week, he sort of knew what the big takeaways were from what he was learning that week, and then how to implement them and oversee them, and then sort of in a cyclical process, capture feedback and then further refine the big ideas. So that then would be the basis for, memos or guidance to the troops, or public statements or speeches. So they would reverberate, like what was on the page. This is a secret document, so not top secret, but not confidential. So in between, so it's the most popular level of classification at that level. And so you're on your unclassified machine for part of the day and your classified machine for the other part of the day, writing this classified memo. But then you take unclassified portions, the ideas from it, and you can use them in public speeches and so forth. So what you learn is like how important writing is to inform those big ideas. And Petraeus once gave a speech back at Princeton. He accepted an award called the Mattis Medal. And we wrote, like, what are the responsibilities of a strategic leader? And it's a very interesting but quite simple idea. It's to get the big ideas correct, to communicate them, to oversee their implementation, and then to capture feedback and refine the ideas in a cycle. And he always said, this is conceptually easy cycle to understand, not optional, but very hard to execute. And so that's what I learned, is like the process of leadership through the process of ordering your ideas and writing. So a lot of people don't realize, like, 80% of my job wasn't writing the speeches. It was like doing the memos internally that no one ever saw except for a very small handful of people at the Pentagon.
It's a really interesting take on what leadership means. I think many outsiders and even people in the military, for that matter, if you were to ask them about the definition of leadership, it usually comes back to some war movie about how people led the charge in the face of all odds. And, it's a fighting thing, typically, is how it's pitched, not, it's a war of words more is what you're describing, I'm thinking.
Well, words can be used as tools to win a competition of ideas, is what I would say. And words can be wielded to unify large ideas into a common narrative, which then inspires groups of people to action. And ultimately, that's what some of the most inspirational military leaders have done, is to inspire this action through their example, principally, and through their words. There's a limit to that, of course. Like, I've written about that a little bit, but that's what I think. Like, the point of leadership is to decide and to inspire action among a group. And this is why, like, political ideology and, like, politicians are, the most successful politicians figure out how to unify a broad set of ideas into, like, a worldview, and then capture people's attention on that worldview. Yeah, I'll stop there. It's like what you're trying to do is, like, settle on a philosophical point of view about the world and share it with people. And often that resonates.
I think what you just described is something that very, very few people do, but it may be one of the most important things that we can do, because it informs how we act. It informs what's important to us and the things that we're pursuing in life. I think if you were to ask, I just think of junior troops primarily in the military of all branches, and you were to ask them, what their definition of that is, and I don't know if anybody could really answer that.
Meaning, what is motivating their everyday actions to get up and put themselves in harm's way and that sort of thing? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, say you're 21 years old and you're an Army sergeant, like they might not be able to express, like, what's motivating them. I think that's what I'm trying to understand what your question is.
Yes, that's a much more eloquent wording. And but then take that to past the service. It's what is it that we're going after? Everything, the time horizon and the thought process isn't looking big enough. It's very much so focused on what's happening today and maybe tomorrow, but just kind of getting through this process rather than thinking like, hey, what am I going after? Why am I doing this?
Yeah, I understand. Well, everyone's motivated by different things. Some of the broadest things that motivate people are attaching themselves to something that's larger than themselves, so that they can create meaning in their life. And I remember my very first day at the Naval Academy looking down at my name tag and seeing the name Mikolay on an actual military uniform. It was like an out-of-body experience. Because I'd never associated my last name with the country of the United States. And, there's like, it's a physical manifestation that you're connected to this larger thing called the Constitution, which is the compact that, overarching compact of our republic. So fundamentally, we're all motivated to protect a way of life, and to protect, if you're taught history well enough, you understand it's like a precious idea. It's an experiment and so forth, that we're running in real time. And it's incredibly unlikely that like life would exist on Earth. And then we'd reach a point where like an actual constitutional republic is self-sustaining. But then you realize it actually is not self-sustaining. It requires everyday work forever if we're going to maintain it. So like ultimately that's, I think, where people like why they potentially join the service is like they might not be able to say it in those words, but they're like, I want to serve something. And it's like a natural patriotism that draws them to that service. I really believe, however, and this is a deeply held conviction that I did not understand until I left the military, which is very odd. When I was in the military for maybe 12 years plus the 4 years at the academy, I never would have like had this like realization about service. What you tend to do, and I was on a submarine once, and like I was on the periscope where we were surfaced, and I was on the bridge, and I was looking over at the Atlantis Resort, which is on an island literally called Paradise. And here I am, like trudging away, stuck on a submarine, and looking at people like in the distance on a cruise ship that's like based in Paradise Island in the Caribbean. And I was like, man, I really resent these people. They're having fun. I'm just stuck here, breathing the metallic, the smell of amine, which is sort of the chemical that we use on a submarine. I did not realize that service is much, much more profound than that, because it separates you. When you take the oath of office, you are profoundly separated from other American citizens in the sense that you now literally have decided to join this subset of American citizens that are currently in active duty service. And stop me if I'm just getting super long-winded, but this is the point I'm trying to make. Like on a surface level, you're trying to protect Americans from harm, but actually that's not your real role. Your job is to free them to do whatever the hell they want to do, and not just to protect them from harm or protect the country. To keep the country so-called safe. So like, I always thought that was my job. My job in the military is to keep America safe. It's not at all your job. It's to prevent most Americans from having to serve so that they can do more interesting things in the arts and the humanities and science and engineering, like freeing the rest of Americans to go do really cool things, to create great art, to create Keeping Up with the Kardashians, whatever it is. Don't resent them for that. Like the health of our society is the output of our scholars, our artists, and our engineers. That's the health of our society. So the point of the military is to free them to do that, not just to keep the country safe. And that's, I think, a much more interesting way of looking at service.
This will be a broad generalization about service that isn't entirely accurate, but I know that many people feel it. While in the service, it is extremely difficult to gain the empowerment to be doing things that are not affiliated with service, doing creative work, owning a business, the population of people within the service that do those things is very, very small. What's ironic about what you just said is that I agree with you. That is what we are serving, is allowing them to do that. But in order for them to do that, we have to like not be able to do that. Kind of like that's the sacrifice that we're making. And there are certainly, that's, like I said, it's a generalization, but I've talked in several past episodes before about how the military can kind of stifle creativity. There isn't this open, free-minded thinking that is encouraged or pushed. It's not fostering to those types of ideas because there is a standard operating procedure for everything. And so like I said, that's ironic that you say that, because you have to sacrifice your ability to do those things and so that others can do it. It's a different level of sacrifice than I think most people talk about.
I want to react to that briefly. The people who pay the ultimate price and make the ultimate sacrifice, they truly have given their lives for this meaningful purpose. People who are, life-changing injuries and so forth, people who have ongoing mental injuries, that is true sacrifice. But for people like me who were never injured in the service, I'm not sure I would use the word sacrifice. I've been thinking a lot about this because often I'm kind of frustrated that I spent, 15 some odd years in my 20s and early 30s in the military and feel really behind professionally, behind my peer group, because they're all senior vice presidents at whatever company because they've been there forever. And, they had 15 extra years to get started in the civilian world. So I sometimes think, man, I made a sacrifice, but I just don't think that's true because, like people say, thank you for your service, right? And they do that too, because it's like socially awkward when you realize somebody served in the military and they didn't, and they feel somehow guilty, which is absolutely misplaced emotion in my view. I think it should be like the relationship between people who have served and haven't served should feel like the relationship between like a mechanic and a farmer. Like the mechanic's doing something important and the farmer's doing something important. And they should just acknowledge each other by like nodding at each other. Like, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for doing what you do. And that's like a mutual appreciation, because they're all part of the same group, not part of different groups, like those who have served and those who have not. The same group is like, we're all loyal to the Constitution, whether we served or not. And one of us served one function and you're serving some other function at like some financial services firm or whatever. So I just don't think sacrifice is the right concept, except from the first sort of group of people that I mentioned. I kind of need to get over this because like I'm not sure how to characterize it in my brain. Like what do I? It doesn't matter that I'm behind professionally-ish because I gained so much from it as well. So it's complicated in my mind.
That's an interesting take, and I think I would disagree on just like the bottom level, just because if it truly was as close as you say, and there was, what you're implying is that there's not a lot of difference. We're serving different functions, but it's just a different type of job, and it is. But I think way more people would do it if the gap was that smaller. Like there's just is so few people who actually are in the military, and that isn't to tout that like I hate that 1% bullshit that people say. That is the stupidest thing. And that is just, it's not a very intelligent way to describe what being in the military is like. But because it is such a small portion of people, it's not 50% farmers and 50% mechanics. It's 99% this and 1% this.
Yeah.
What is interesting that you speak about the professional differences that you've kind of experienced and are working to overcome. I felt the exact same way. And I served for 4 years but I still feel that. And it's interesting because getting out of the military was exactly what I needed to understand everything else in life that I wanted to accomplish. Before that, I was this dirtbag kid who just like had no aspirations of anything. But then getting out, I saw, I'm like, wow, look at all of these things that I can go do. But then for some reason that small time period, the thing that actually unlocked this different worldview, this different perspective, and an understanding of what I was actually capable in life, somehow I look on that period as it's a setback. And for the exact same things that you said, it's my friends are here. I got out and my friends they had their degrees already. It's the same thing, but just kind of rewinded a little bit.
Yeah. And does this get at your previous point related to the common lack of people doing creative work outside of their specific roles in the military, and therefore they're not sort of in that cyclical, continuous cycle of learning something that's not their assigned task. So let's say you're going through nuclear power school and then you're serving on a submarine. You're already busy enough doing that job that you can't improve yourself elsewhere. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm getting at. And that's
go
ahead.
So it's funny because nuclear power school and serving on the submarine were the hardest intellectual things I've ever done by an order of magnitude. And I've gone to Princeton, I've gone to the Naval Academy, so I've been in like challenging academic environments, but nuclear stuff took it to a whole new level. And it's just it's first principles all the way to the metal. Like, everything about nuclear radiation, all of the chemistry, all of the electrical engineering, all of the calculus, everything, all the way. There's like 8 different subjects that all combine together to inform how to operate safely the nuclear reactor. And I often think, man, I knew so much science and engineering when I successfully took the chief nuclear engineer exam for when you're sort of halfway through your first tour on a submarine. You go to naval nuclear reactors and take this extremely hard exam, and you have to have all of it in your head. And I often think I have forgotten more on that one subject alone that has not helped me at all. And so professionally, it's not been a stalagmite that has been growing because of all the drippings of all the things that I've been learning. All the drippings have been all over the place. Like, I've learned, I've been in a lot of different professional roles, and this admiral, right before I was deciding whether to get out or stay in the military, Admiral Stavridis, who I think he was the SAC-EUR, maybe the U.S. European commander and the NATO allied commander. He was a 4-star admiral and made time for me. I was like a lowly lieutenant and 7 ranks below him. And he said something like, what's cool about the Navy is you go to sea and then you come on land and you learn on each of these different contexts. So you can challenge yourself on your land shore assignments and your sea assignments. And it's very creatively refreshing to shift from one to the other. And meanwhile, you're being promoted. So within that bureaucracy, you're just going higher and higher and higher while having more interesting stuff. And if you get out, you're just going to leave your stalagmite droppings in all these different areas, and you won't be elevated to the pinnacle of that stalagmite. And so the coolest thing about seeing all these people in Washington, D.C. and traveling with them, it was I would always imagine a metaphor of a bunch of stalagmites, and the people that are talking to each other are on the top of each stalagmite. So everybody that, Leon Panetta was meeting was like the CEO of whatever organization. So he was the CEO talking to another CEO, both at the top of their bureaucratic stalagmites. And that's a lot of what people say is their professional goal is to reach the top of their field. And so he advised me to stay in for that very reason. And I often think about that because I've sort of jumped around. I don't think I'm going to regret it on my deathbed because I've had a really interesting, unique life so far and done interesting things in different fields. But that's one way to think about professional development. One thing I'd like to talk about is just how challenging the transition is when you get out. And everyone across the board, to a person, universally underestimates the significance of that transition. If you've served for 1 year or 10 years or 20 years. One thing you can do is sort of stay in the defense industrial complex. And that is a very natural transition or way to transition. I very affirmatively made the decision that I found that broader military industrial complex to be soul sucking. I really think one of the worst things in life is to be cynical, but I got kind of cynical about it in many ways, because a lot of these defense contractors, I believe, waste a lot of American money, American taxpayer dollars. So if you want to like do a hard break and do something other than the defense industrial complex, that's really, really hard to do if you've served for like 10, 15 years. Trying to like take an interview at Google after having been a submariner is extremely hard. I joined Palantir, which is an incredibly technical company composed of primarily, 95% of world-class software engineers and computer scientists and so forth, developers. But I joined in a non-technical role. And that learning curve was vertical for me. Stepping into their company Slack and just trying to make sense of all of the technical concepts that people were talking about behind the scenes was, I consider myself, I can assimilate a lot of information very fast. It's one thing I think I'm very good at, and like sort of distilling that information into plain English. But that was super, super hard to make that transition. And emotionally, just like a black and white difference between being in the military, which is like you're kind of a domesticated animal, to like you have to like literally live with the wolves. It's just hard, man. I really would love to hear your thoughts on this.
It is extremely difficult, and I vastly underestimated it as well. Even spending 4 years, I still, to this day, I got out in 2018, and I think in some ways I'm still working on it.
Yes,
and
100%.
Going through the podcast process over the last year has certainly accelerated that. I've mentioned in several prior interviews, when I got out, I tried to kind of walk away from service, which was the exact opposite thing of what I should have done. In my head, I was like, I don't want to be just this veteran that just is rubbing it in people's faces all the time, and was so repulsed by that. I made a very conscious effort to not bring it up and try to just kind of assimilate into society again, which wasn't the right thing to do. Like I said, talking with people and understanding other people's experiences, and also embracing the tools and resources available, have been extremely helpful. But I don't know, the whole, what is it? The phrase that the Marines talk about, like once a Marine, always a Marine kind of thing. That was something that I think everybody kind of feels like it will always be a part of you. And there may be a lingering thing forever there that's just kind of in the back of your head about it. It's always going to be there.
Yes. Well said. By the way, I would recommend the Wall Street Journal op-ed that Jim Mattis wrote by himself without any assistance. I'm not sure when he wrote it exactly, but it's called The Meaning of Their Service. And it is an absolutely beautiful, breathtaking, spellbinding 800 words about what service means. It probably will like self-contradict a couple of the things that we've been talking about, or at least that I've said, because in his view, it's just different. It's like different to serve in that capacity than it is to do the mechanic farmer thing. But anyway, I would just recommend people read that. I may be behind a paywall, but I think I have the version I can post somewhere.
Yeah, perfect. I'd love to get a link to that in the show notes so people can read it. And I haven't read it, so I would love to read it. Do you regret getting out?
No, not at all. I thought you were going to say, do you regret serving?
That would be a bold statement.
No,
I haven't had anybody on here yet that I would ask that question. I would need to find somebody very salty, because I don't think that anybody would say, I don't think anybody.
Oh, no, I
this.
do regret it to some extent. I've actually had a debate. We were at a bar in Annapolis with my best friends, and many of them are submariners, and we were all around the table, and many have moved back to Annapolis. We're all hang out. And I think we had, the number one grad in our class was there. He was a Marine. And then the rest of us, I think, were submariners. And I asked the question, do you guys regret it going to the academy, for example? And then obviously serving subsequent to that. And every one of them's like, no. I loved it. It was great. It was I would never change a thing. And I was like, I don't know. I think I regret going. Part of me does, like a significant part, because of some of the things we've been talking about already. Like, because, for example, the best way to put this is I was obsessed with technology in high school. I loved computers. I went to the science fair, sort of a nerd in that way. And this was 1997 when I graduated. What I ought to have done is move directly to Silicon Valley and go to Stanford. And I could have started a great company that could have changed the world, or done something really interesting at one of the unicorns, because that's who really I was. And then I changed into a different person at the academy, did political science because I wanted to round out the engineering, which is, you get a Bachelor of Science there. And then I did more engineering in nuclear power school and so forth, and came out of it. And I have naturally spiraled back into this creative world. I still love, creative technical tools and things like that. So in that way, like, part of me does regret not going to where I was naturally inclined to go, but instead decided to, serve the country, which is kind of a weird thing to say. But I definitely don't regret getting out, because I just didn't want to serve for the next several years underwater. And I was looking at like 8 of the next 11 years at sea, underwater on a submarine, to then, be the commanding officer, and then, go to be the commodore of a squadron of submarines, and so forth and so on. I think I could have done very well if I stayed in. I think I really could, because I love writing, and I think that's like a really important part of these leadership positions. And like the people who can communicate super effectively, I think are elevated, promoted very rapidly. But I didn't meet my wife Maggie until I was out. Oh no, I was still in when I met her, but I was making the decision to get out or stay in, like in parallel with that. And I'm like, I would like to get married to her, and I'll be underwater for 8 of the next 11 years. That doesn't sound right. So I'm very happy with where I am in life. Like I feel like I'm having, I have a great work-life balance. And that's like probably the most important thing. And I'm not sure I would have had that if I would have stayed in. That's not to say that it's not perfect for some people to, become senior military leaders, but that's my personal perspective.
I normally ask questions like this towards the end of the conversation, but I think it may be relevant based on how you responded to this question. What is the end game for you? What will you be upset with if your life, like, what do you wish that you would have done if you died tomorrow? Like, what would be that one thing? Because I'm guessing, I'm going to speculate here before you answer, it has something to do with some sort of accomplishment around building a company. You've talked about, you started Erasmus, the personal content. I forget what the exact phrase that you used for that was, but that, and you also talked about why you regret joining the Navy. A part of it, I won't fault you for that, but yeah. Thinking of what you could have achieved had you not gone in. And so that tells me that that brings me to that question.
First of all, I want to clarify that, like, I think 20 years from now, everything I just said, I might like amend or revise, because I feel like part of that is like a super selfish way to think of that experience serving in the military. And like, I bet if I get more wise and mature, I'll probably like say that the statements that I made before were just like selfish and immature. But in any event, I have a file on my computer I call the basics. And it's just like putting in plain English, just bullet points of like basic things I've realized. And it goes from like, here, I'll just like bring it up. Like the things you realize when you move through life, and if you're like thinking through life, you're like learning about like the nature of reality is like the first thing, the first layer of things you learn about like what is life like. It's like both beautiful and sublime and harsh and unforgiving at the same time. So that's like the reality of life, your environment, your conditions that are surrounding you. And like the whole and most important part is like choosing who to surround yourself with, and like actively creating your own environment. And then you learn you can actually like change your environment. You're not like a victim of that environment, if you will. And then it's like, okay, well, what attitude do you want to adopt for your life? Like, what is your disposition, your like outlook, your approach? So once you understand the nature of life, it's like, how do you attack it? So like, what kind of attitude do you want? And I always like people who are curious, inquisitive, and aware. So that's like layer 2. Layer 3 is like, well, what do you want to learn? Like, what's the knowledge? Like, what understanding do you want to develop? And then you learn like, well, the way to succeed in life is thinking ahead and cooperating with others. And then finally, it's like, what is your goal? What is your purpose in life? Like, what's your direction? And to me, it's pretty simple. Health in mind, body, and spirit, relationships that are positive and loving with family and friends, and a positive contribution to some worthwhile endeavor. So like, it's not enough just to be healthy in all of those respects and to have positive and loving relationships. Like, humans have an innate drive for novelty and originality and like creating something new. I've always been obsessed with this idea of knowledge management, personal knowledge management. I would love to build something around that before I go. So that's how I would describe like my purpose, my animating purpose is all of those things.
That's a pretty good answer.
Yeah.
High level, but a good answer nonetheless. I hope that in some time that you will look back and maybe that feeling of maybe regret, even if it's a small tinge, will go away, and that it will be feeling that sense of serving something and creating something that's worthwhile, even though that there isn't anything inherently creative about serving in the military. I don't think in some respect it is, but it's generally you're filling a position and a body for a larger purpose. But I think that's I'm like having like a weird kind of out of body experience right now, because I never thought that I would be the person to like sit here and try and convince you of this. Was the last thing that I thought I was going to be saying today.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, my cross country coach at Navy, he always used to say, spend yourself in a worthy cause. I really like that. Like, spend your energy in some pursuit that you can define as worthy. Like we're really only here on life. Like it's a miracle that we're here. Like, I did a thread the other day on like 7 mind-blowing things that you can discover about the universe. And I watched this video for like an hour. Over the last couple of years, I've watched this video by a professor who describes what he calls the origin of the elements. And it is like, for some reason, it's captivating to me that all of the atoms that make you up have been in 4 stars during the history of the universe. And it just so happened that those atoms on their 4th visit around a star, which happens to be our sun, like landed right at the surface of the earth. And like, like we're here now. It's an absolutely mind-blowing miracle. And so we ought to be doing something with it. And I actually thought, this is going to get really heavy for a second. I actually had this thought the other day, like for no reason, but I'm like, I'm taking a risk here and sharing this with you. A very strong risk. My roommate at nuclear power school committed suicide. I actually thought about him while watching that video and thinking, man, what a miracle it was that he was alive. And what a shame it was that he took his own life, because maybe he didn't understand or internalize sufficiently like how miraculous his own life was. And I think all of us should like step back and realize we have one opportunity to do something interesting and to help other people, or to, love other people. Yeah, that was a significant event in my life, but I'm like still processing that. That happened 20 years ago. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of emphasize the point of how unlikely it is that we're here and how special it is.
Well, first off, I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that the Navy faces probably the biggest challenge right now, in my opinion, is probably worse than it's ever been, but they face a tremendous challenge with suicide right now and morale as a whole. There's a lot of work to be done on that. the idea of having one life to live and like serving a worthy cause is something that resonates with me really hard. And it's a very tremendous burden at the same time, because I'm not sure that if you feel this way as well, but sometimes I worry that like maybe you get to the end of your life and you won't have like completed enough. Like if you start to think like that, sometimes I feel like I need to suppress that feeling, because I feel like if I think too much that way, I would literally quit my job, quit everything that I'm doing, and commit my life to solving like the world's biggest problems: space, deep sea exploration, nuclear energy. Like, why am I not working on that? And I scare myself sometimes. Like, and I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. She was just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, there's just so many interesting problems. And like, why am I not working on those? Do you ever feel that way?
That's an absolutely beautiful point. I really like that idea that you just shared, because I think the other day I had a realization as well that maybe I'm not doing things that are tackling a vision, like really to execute vision, which would then allow me to learn very fast. Because like there's a great Naval Ravikant quote. He said something like, "Success is merely a byproduct of learning. The more curious you are about it, the more successful you will be." That's a great set of ideas. And so maybe I'm not curious enough about a hard problem at the moment, and it's not driving me to do something valuable for society or for me or whomever. So I think like I need to do some like internal personal reflection about like maybe I need a mission. Like, what mission do I want to go on? What problem do I want to solve that's hard and interesting? I want to say one other thing that's kind of related, kind of not related, but I really appreciate your invitation to have me on this podcast. And you said such like kind words, like you are a thoughtful guy and I've been following you. And I was like, man, like, lately, whatever I tweet doesn't get any engagement. And I don't know if that's the algorithm or me or what have you. And like, it's just, your note reinforced for me that like, if you put yourself out there, it might actually impact someone else. Like, and you have no idea who is reaching. And the more you put yourself out there, the more you discover about yourself. And so there's like and then the more you discover about yourself, the more you can share with others. And that's a wonderful reinforcing cycle, a feedback loop, a spiral, I call them. So like starting that spiral can be super useful for you and very useful for someone else. So I think more people should crawl out of their shell and shout into the void for as long as it takes to reach somebody and just keep that momentum going. I wish I would have started tweeting in 2009 when I started in my Twitter account, but instead I lurked and did nothing. In the first 10 years I was on Twitter, I tweeted 100 times. That's it. And reached exactly no one. And then I started tweeting more regularly and engaging with people directly and like developing relationships very genuinely with like, I would reach out to Jack Butcher when he had like 4,000 followers. And we have become very good friends. And like, it's incredible that you can like, it's the world's most incredible thing that you can reach anyone in the world if you just put yourself out there enough. That just did not exist for all of written history until the last couple decades. It's really a remarkable thing. So I don't know why I just said all that, but I've been meaning to share it with you.
I appreciate it. From a third-party external observer perspective of you and what you're doing, I would certainly believe, without having said what you just did, that you were already on that path and that you were already serving this thing because you are doing what appears to be interesting to you. And I think that there's an important line that needs to be drawn about searching the world to do something that the world wants rather than pursuing what it is that you want, because there's a certain element of authenticity that people can pick up on. And eventually doing something for other people in a way that isn't authentic isn't, one, it's not sustainable, and two, it's not valuable because it's not you.
Yes.
So I think that whatever path that you're on right now, maybe I'm not going to tell you what the most important thing is for you, but it certainly appears optically that you are. And I certainly have found value in it. I was listening to you on Clubhouse like years ago now. So this conversation has been a really long time coming. I know I had only messaged you a year ago on Twitter about getting on the show, but I've been waiting for this moment. And it's interesting because this podcast has been a very great medium to talk to interesting people that I have looked up to. A guy I just recorded with earlier this week, we were just kind of talking about something randomly, and for some reason he brought up Jack Butcher, and I was like, oh, like somebody else who knows Jack, like that's great. Like I also have been following Jack, and he's like, oh no, we're friends. And I was like, they live near each other and are like friends. And I'm like, what? So in the same way that you talk about putting yourself out there and speaking, even if seemingly to no one, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be a podcast, whether it be something, you need to give yourself the opportunity for serendipity or karma or whatever you want to call it to begin, and do it long enough where it can come back to you.
Totally agree. There is, I think, an important aspect to human happiness, which is like standing for something, having some conviction around like just having a set of ideas that like fit together into what I would call a personal philosophy. There's an incredibly great book called This I Believe, which was I think maybe Edward R. Murrow, the radio personality and newscaster in the 50s, I think, started this series where he would record somebody talking about literally what they believe in 2 minutes and just play that on the radio. And these are all very, very thoughtful people who have, throughout the course of their lives, like developed a personal philosophy about something, anything. Could be like fly fishing or something. But there's, profound things you can say about life in the context of fly fishing. And this series was transcribed into a book, and it's you can get it on Amazon, called This I Believe, and it's really wonderful. And my point is, I think it'd be great if we all developed a personal philosophy. So on our deathbed, like we stand for something and we've shared it to the world. And I think what I'd like to express further is that you can't develop a worldview without sharing it in conversation with other people, like without colliding those ideas against the ideas of other people, which again demands that you put yourself out there. And my life has been enriched a lot since I started just writing things online and getting over my own ego. The thing that stops people from sharing is actually they have a high ego, not that they have a low ego. That's a very counterintuitive concept, but in my early days, I was like, oh man, people are going to care about what I say. And therefore I should be like, ooh, maybe I should hesitate to share it. The fact is, no one cares at all what your ideas are. In a sense, they're just too worried about their own things and their own sort of how they're positioning themselves in the world. So like counterintuitively, if you have like a super low ego and you're like, no one's really going to care about this, but I'm going to share it anyway. That's like the thing that like is the unlock that helps you get out there. And I really think like doing that, it just like, I really think it just, although there's billions of people and it's like hard to reach and resonate with those people, there's actually like super small subsets of those people for whom you could become best friends, or like with whom you could become best friends. And it's really cool to like make contact with those people. And like David Perel calls it being a lighthouse. You put your light on and everyone's like, oh, wow. You're like attract the people who have the same resonant frequency as you. I think that's a really fun, like a lot of my very good friends now, I only know having met from Twitter, and it's just a neat group of people like who are just inspiring. So
I think that's so true. I was listening to somebody talk the other day. I forget who it was, but they were saying something. They were speaking to people who are worried or nervous about putting themselves out there online. And the point that they were making is that first of all, nobody gives a shit. Like the deal is you can't put yourself out there too much. Like it is impossible to do that because it's what you put out doesn't get seen in the way that you think it does. If you post a tweet and somebody sees it, there's a good chance that they won't see the next one. You could post something completely different 10 minutes later, they wouldn't see it. And it's because the way the viewing habits are not exactly intuitive to how we don't think about how we consume our own information, but we have a viewpoint about how others perceive it. And that just is wrong, first of all. And then the second point is exactly what you just said. By doing that, by putting yourself out there in a way, you naturally attract the people who agree. It's almost dangerous because you kind of become your own echo chamber of like, everybody who believes that is going to be interested. It's either that or you just attract a bunch of people who want to like follow you and shit on you, which is usually like politically driven, and it's not a good thing. But generally, you're going to attract the people who also believe that. I consistently think about how divisive Joe Rogan is in some ways, but he's like the most popular person ever. Like he's got, I don't have any viewpoint on his opinions on anything, but he's got some very controversial opinions about stuff, and some people hate him, but everybody loves him. So like, why would people think, or why would you think that wouldn't be the same for you?
I agree. To be clear, I am still not excellent at this yet, meaning I still self-censor 90%, needlessly self-censor 95% of my good ideas rather than share them, which is silly. I should be tweeting like 10x more than I actually do, because it would like I said, I think everyone should have a continuous cycle of learning. And like, I always resented people who just shared random thoughts on Twitter, but really what they're doing is just clearing out their creative process and like getting it, like the flow of information out of their heads, which is helping their own process of growth. I want to read to you a statistic that I sort of created by doing the math. You're going to like this, I think. The internet is 1,165,000 groups of 4,000 people. I really like that way of thinking about it. So there's like every little niche that you can like possibly think of still has 4,000 people, and there's 165,000 groups of those. And like Twitter's daily active users would fill the largest stadium in the United States 2,000 times. So like that's like the University of Michigan stadium. It's like 110,000 people times 2,000 are on Twitter every single day. So it's just it's the scale of opportunity on the internet is hard to grasp.
And it's funny how we perceive scale. I think early on in this podcast game, as I am, and for other people also on the podcast journey, very early days, you're looking at download numbers and you're like, oh my God, like what, only this? Like this is the only amount of people I can reach. But you think about, if you start out on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, it's getting 100 followers in a month or whatever is probably not unrealistic. Think about talking to 100 people.
Yes, exactly.
Like think about getting up on stage to talk to 100 people. That's 100 people that have said, yes, I'm interested in what this person has to say. Like that, yes. We get into our heads about the comparison game because you see, well, this person has 1 million followers. They have 100,000 downloads. They have this, whatever. So what?
Yeah. Now there's a flip side to this. Like there's a disingenuous way to be sharing your stuff just to try to get growth and like hack the system. And like it's self-evident to me when there's like certain people that are hacking it to hack it rather than to like challenge themselves intellectually or learn something or do something worthwhile. Like now the counterpoint to that is, well, just hack growth until you actually have an audience, and then you can do interesting and valuable things with it. So there's a little chicken and egg problem there. But
I think that the people that try to hack growth will they think about that. They think they're going to do that strategy. And then when it comes time to actually put together something real, they won't be able to, and they're going to tank. When your entire foundation is built on people that want to read Wikipedia articles in a new format, then the second you start trying to add interesting overlay, they don't follow you for your thoughts. You're not an original thinker. People don't follow Jack on Twitter because he's going to put out Wikipedia articles about how to, some weird mental framework that you can't even pronounce. He doesn't do that. Like,
yeah, that's true. I do think like there's a lot of stuff out there around frameworks and mental models and ways of thinking about the world. And those are I think, generally speaking, helpful. They can get a little cliche sometimes. One thing that I struggle with a lot is I feel like if I've learned something 20 years ago that like I've read, I saw Sahil Bloom did a tweet on Benjamin Franklin's like virtues. He has like a list of 11 or 13 different like I think they're called virtues or something like that. And I've read that 20 years ago. I like read his whole autobiography when I was a freshman at the Naval Academy and really enjoyed that. And like sharing it to me seems obvious because probably everyone else has already read it. But like there's probably a lot of people who haven't read it, and it would be nice to be valuable, interesting for me to share it. So I often, again, just like self-censor things that I feel like everybody's probably already seen that, I'm not sure what I'm trying to make, but
you have put a lot of thought into how to help individuals narrow down their ideas about what they have that's valuable. You have the 10x writing course with Maven, which you're still teaching, right?
No, not actually. I have a full-time job now, so I turned that off for a bit.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring it back because now Maven's like gone public and it's kind of cool. And I really that team is really cool. Wes Cow, Gagan Biani, those are great entrepreneurs, really fun. And that platform is super powerful. I would recommend it to anyone. I wasn't good at like closing the students to join the course, and so I have a full-time gig at a small tech company currently in business development. I like plan to continue to be active on Twitter and share thoughts and learnings and stuff like that. So one day I could see myself teaching that course, but to your point, I really love engaging with creative people. It's like the thing that makes me happiest, and helping them express their ideas. A lot of what we've talked about as part of this conversation informs that. And I think a lot of people just need to like listen to their own voice of like what is resonating with them. And it's fun to see when they can like build something. Or I worked with a gentleman who wrote about all the things he's learned teaching organizations to become learning organizations, Andrew Barry. And it was a great process of helping him put that in writing. But I think you might have had a more concrete question about it.
I was going to ask, what are the steps that you take people through when you were teaching that about how to get them from, hey, these are the things that I'm interested in, to packaging them up and doing something with them, whether that be in a business way or just in a way that we can help others?
That's a good question. I'm going to look at my workshops here. So the bottom line is we did a bunch of exercises. I co-taught this course with James Baird. And what I learned from taking a course called literally I took a cohort-based course on how to build a cohort-based course, which is like, they needed to start a two-sided marketplace. They needed students. This is Maven. They needed students on the one hand, but they needed instructors on the other hand. So to start the flywheel going, they had to train instructors on how to do these courses so that they could get students. It's kind of like how Uber needed drivers and riders. In any event, so they taught us how to teach these courses. And the key thing is to do a series of, to draw information out of people's heads through a series of exercises. So, we'd send them an interactive Google Doc that would ask them a bunch of questions about their own thoughts, their own creative process, and force them to write, several pages on like describing their what is motivating them creatively, like what do they want to learn about, or what do they know about specifically that other people don't know about, and how is that different from, how is their point of view different from anyone else, like what makes them unique philosophically. And so it was, I think we did this course. I'm very proud of the experience we had the very first time teaching this course, because in my view, that very first course was like the best outcomes. People, like, I think we did 5 weeks and I was terrified. I'd never taught an online course and never taught a cohort-based course. What's funny, because like I sat across the desk from the Secretary of Defense, 2 of them, traveled the world with them, been to like 65 different countries with all of these generals and admirals and cabinet secretaries, and was never nervous. But I was super nervous teaching this course for reasons that I still don't understand. Like, I'd log onto the Zoom and I'd do all the prep work and I was ready. It was such a fun experience. We met like 3 times a week for about, I think, 90 minutes with these students, and did, one big workshop for 5 straight weeks with like exercises and then a deliverable. And they would like have to every Friday, Saturday, Sunday or something like that, send a work product to the entire cohort, and then all of us would pick it apart. And it was a blast. And I think people came out of that experience with like extra motivation and an self-understanding of what makes them unique. So that was the point of it. And then of course they had all the work products that we were building. I can't recall like what we did specifically and concretely and tangibly, so I'm going to fail on that score. But happy to follow up maybe in some show notes with like some ideas there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as I was talking with you before we started recording, I think that is one of my goals with this podcast, is inspire people to action, to do something about their ideas. Everybody's got them. Not very many people do something with them, and finding unique ways to package up the knowledge that we have and make a positive impact on other people in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like, I think is much more important than people realize.
I agree. I would say, here's a way I would put this. Like my purpose, I think what I do on Twitter, which is still not like hasn't seized like broad attention, but because I haven't been doing it prolifically enough, but I actually do want to continue to do this more prolifically. Like, I really think it's like a life mission to inspire people to be creative. And I feel like success is inevitable with enough earnest effort over time, enough earnest creative work over time. Like, and success could mean building a following, or it could just mean like publishing something really thoughtful. And like, I just think the world needs more thoughtful information out there. And so I like literally just want to inspire people to be creative. I tweeted like something yesterday about Albert Einstein, and I think you saw it potentially. A kid, a really young child in his or her own handwriting, wrote to Albert Einstein in 2017. And he, of course, had died in 1955.
A couple years late.
Dear Albert, or dear Mr. Einstein, I hope you never stop being curious. And I just think that is such a wonderful like life goal, is to just stay curious. And like the coolest 80-year-olds are like the most curious. Like that is like a completely life-affirming thing, is to continue to learn. Like my grandpa, John Moskell, he's passed away now, but he was like an inveterate. His constitution was built to learn. He was like great at the iPad when he was 83. Like he loved to learn, loved to write, loved to communicate, and that kept him young mentally all the way to the end.
You may have already just answered this question, but if I were to ask, what is something that we could learn from you that we could implement in our lives today, what would that be?
I think what I call this book of wisdom is really a way for your ideas to, instead of decaying, to grow on themselves, to build on themselves. So like what I like to do is have my ideas build on themselves over time. And the way I have discovered to do that is by just adopting a practice called building a book of wisdom. And this is again, and we talked about it really at the beginning of this conversation, but it's a very simple process. I'm actually going to look at the different columns of my Notion file so that I can describe it in, concrete detail if I can find it. So for context, I think you might have learned this from a podcast or two that I've done in the past, but Jim Mattis is a role model to me. I admire him. He's a deeply thoughtful human being. Not perfect, of course, because there's no unalloyed heroes in the world. But he kept these voluminous binders, 3-ring binders, handwritten with that he called his Book of Wisdom, and he figured out this practice by hitchhiking to San Francisco when he was living in the central Washington state, and he met one of his role models, Eric Hoffer, who wrote a bunch of books, and he's called the philosopher, the longshoreman philosopher. I think he was like a lobsterman, but deeply philosophical and a great writer. Published a bunch of books. One of which was called The True Believer. And Eric told Jim Mattis, like, write down the things that are resonating with you. That sounds silly because it sounds obvious, but he took that to heart and dramatically created these amazing testaments to everything he's consumed in his life that has resonated with him. And they, by extension, represent his own personal philosophy if you just read through them. I was able to channel who he is as a human being by reading what he was quoting, simply what he was excerpting out of the world. And I understood him better from reading the things he was reading than the things he was saying, if that makes sense. So I always say this to people, like, if you admire someone's work, read what they are reading. And that's why I thought Erasmus would be such a great idea. And I still believe it could be done effectively and successfully and scale. But if you had a mechanism to see what other people are reading, if the platform required you to share URLs and you were not allowed to tweet unless you shared something that you were tweeting about and the excerpt of it, you could see into other people's brains and into their heads, what was going into their head, not what's coming out of their head. So I know this is a long answer, but hopefully it's interesting. So Mattis created these. I wanted to create a digital version of this. And the simplest possible digital version of this is to have the excerpt, so the thought, and a heading for that thought. So like the creative process, and then an excerpt about the creative process from something you're reading, like a book about time management or something, or Jim Collins' interview on creativity. And then a tag. So tagging it so you could sort and filter across all the stuff, a decade later, because it's going to be a lot of thoughts. The thinker, so the source, and then the so what. So the so what is rewriting that excerpt in your own words, creating from it. And the only way you can prove to yourself you understand what you're excerpting is to write it in your own original language. If you do that if you adopt that as a practical process in your life, then creating is inevitable, in my view.
Will you read us the first thing that's in your Book of Wisdom?
Yeah, sure. It is on the creative process. It says 20-mile march, personal, professional, organizational. Something you do consistently that imposes a high level of discipline that accumulates to results. And this was from Jim Collins. And I'll also say the last one, Elbert Hubbard. Conformists die, but heretics live forever. Actually, no, it just refreshed. That's not even the last one. Francis Crick. Any theory that can account for all the facts is wrong because some of the facts are always wrong. I love that. It talks.
That's really good.
That's pretty good. Yeah, a good one.
I really like that idea.
Here's a great one from Frobenius. Euler lacked only one thing to make him a perfect genius. He failed to be incomprehensible. I like that.
I love the idea of putting down the things that mean something to you. And I would imagine that maybe over time, some things fade out and maybe don't mean as much, but it's still interesting to keep a log and kind of like a running timeline of how your own thought process develops over time.
But yeah, I like that. I call it building a book of wisdom. It's kind of the way I sort of pay homage to Mattis inspiring it.
Absolutely. Justin, this has been a really, really fun conversation. I have very much appreciated your time and sharing wisdom with us today. What can the listeners and myself do to be useful to you?
Oh, wow. What a great question. My goodness. I would say, like, engage in a spirit of friendship. I would love to, I call, it's funny. There's a thing called generative AI. That's the hot thing. Like, for decades, I've liked the word generative, not in a technological sense, but I love people who are generative in the sense that, if you put something out, they're yes and type of people, not yes but, or you see the distinction there. Like, they build on your ideas and make them stronger, steel against steel, that sort of thing. So there is a class of, there are like trolls on Twitter, but there's the opposite of trolls. There are like people who are generative and like add something interesting to the stuff that you're putting out there, and like engage, comment. So I like the idea of like developing friendships, intellectual friendships, and like saying interesting things that like are help move you forward in life. So be generative, what I would say.
Absolutely. Justin, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brock. I've loved the conversation and I greatly appreciate the invitation.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.